Had a lot of downside in the crypto space and across different market segments, including the stock market, the commodities market, you name it, any segment, even bonds, everything's pulled back, but we may have a bottom in place. This is an update on Litecoin. And as of our last few updates, we had a very bearish pattern developing with the potential for quite some downside follow through. So we had a first wave down after our end of March peak around March 30th that looked very scarily impulsive. We actually broke our upside 5-wave diagonal pattern and it was looking ominous. We had a nice second wave bounce. It was a little bit, actually it was textbook depth, so about a 38.2% retrace. And once we broke support, we fell through really hard. If you guys recall, I did mention I sold about half my positions somewhere back here. So for Litecoin, maybe around the $100 mark. And well, once we had our 1-2 in place, I had these Fibonacci extensions giving us our targets. And while our third wave was a little bit short of your standard expectations, we got our fourth wave bounce, and then we followed through sharply and more than made up all the ground with our fifth wave down that actually hit into ideal extension expectations. You typically expect your fifth wave in an impulse to hit the 1.764 to 2.0 extensions. That was between 58 and about $50. We almost touched $50. So our official low was about, let's see, $52 and change. And I have bought the dip since. Of course, I'm not perfect. So I did end up buying my coins back either a little earlier or a little before. This dip happened officially on May 12th, 2:30 in the morning, my time. And ever since then, we've had some upside action. So this is the 5-minute chart. And if you've been following my channel, I've been highlighting the potential that we already have a 5-wave impulse up in place. It looked like we initially may have had one at this point. This is on May 13th, but then we extend a little bit higher. So things start to get a little iffier looking. Higher isn't necessarily better, especially if you don't get your requisite standard pullback first. So I'm interpreting it like this. You got a 1, 2, 3 in blue, fourth wave, and then we may be in a fifth wave, or perhaps we had a truncated fifth wave. I'm not totally convinced of that particular thing. So while we have some kind of potentially impulsive pattern up, we're not out of the woods, because we could just as easily count this as some kind of a corrective wave until we see more follow through on the upside. Now, this is Litecoin. We've seen different patterns in Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I've been kind of going back between Bitcoin and Ethereum and the altcoins. Bitcoin and Ethereum have their own pattern. It looks a little less confident, in my personal opinion. Ethereum looks a little bit better. We didn't quite extend as high as we would liked for a first wave, for a 5-wave first wave impulse. Bitcoin Cash has been my proxy for all the altcoins, and it probably has possibly the most convincing arrangement. Again, we have a very unorthodox looking fourth wave. The proportions are a little funky, but nothing that breaks Elliott wave rules officially. We got a first and a second, really long third wave, which may or may not divide into an impulsive format, long fourth wave, and a higher high for the fifth wave. Fourth wave did not overlap the top of the first wave. So this is convincingly a first wave up, and we may be in some kind of maybe a second wave consolidation. It's a little iffy just because it's been going sideways for so long. So that's where we stand with the altcoins on the whole. We've had things have been going a bit sideways. So what do we expect next? Well, it would be nice if we just tore straight up from here. At least get in this box. That's what we call the pivot region. If we got in this box and turned back down, that would be a convincing fifth wave up. I would expect to see a 3-wave correction, and then we would pull back in bullish fashion very quickly. Otherwise, if we break this red line, that is the 76.4% retrace. That sits about $57, $57.13. Breaking this wouldn't necessarily mean that the rally is over, but it would be a strong sign that we may be tearing down for a lower low. After all, we don't have too much downside room on Litecoin because we almost got to our 2.0 extension. We're going to revisit that on our big picture chart momentarily. Otherwise, if we do start rallying through here, if we get through this box, that's what we call our pivot region, 0.618 to 0.764 extension. So $77 to $80. If we break through that, that may mean we're not coming back down, but the potential for this to be a bigger C wave does loom. So we need to make sure this thing gets through at least $93 eventually. It might not happen right away, but that would be far more convincing that we're done with, at least in the near term. So big picture, we've had this chart and we've had this red box for a while. I think as far back as January, February, I had this potential target down lower. The red bearish alternate pattern never left the chart, no matter how much I want to take it off. And now you see why in Elliott wave theory and Elliott wave analysis, we always have alternate patterns. I've had complaints from viewers that, well, I'm wishy-washy. There's too many patterns on the chart. Take one and stick with it. That's a recipe for disaster. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You better have your alternate patterns on the chart so that if one of your primary patterns invalidates, you have a backup. So in this case, this was what happened. We followed through on the lower low and we got exactly into our box. This was based on an A and a B and your C wave hitting the 1.0 extension, but as far down as the 1.382, and we got pretty close. We could see this thing go down lower to 32.82. That would be the 1.61 day extension. That is what this orange C wave is showing. It's essentially the same thing. It just has it makes concessions to see a possible lower low, and this holds true in pretty much every crypto. I know EOS invalidated officially its upside setup, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can't rally. It just means we don't have a standard impulsive setup in place. Nothing else has gotten to that point. The closest would be Dash, but Litecoin is not really too close to invalidation. So we do have some cushion to go a bit lower. Perhaps we only get to $45 or so. If that happens, that's what the orange pattern is. So orange and red are basically the same. Red just says that it's over and we're ready to rally. And finally, the green pattern is just a different interpretation of the shape. I did go over a couple updates ago how I have the primary pattern, keep looking at this rally since December 2018 as a diagonal. So you got a 1, 2, third wave, and we are presumably finishing a fourth wave with the fifth wave left for the diagonal. The green pattern is a more bullish stance that says that this whole thing is actually a first wave, and we got a lot more upside ahead. We're not going to know any dip. We're not going to be able to distinguish this at all for a long time. So the green pattern is just really something I'm keeping on the back burner for now, but there's reason to believe we are done because again, we hit our target box. Other coins are turning up. We have our MACD divergence still very nicely preserved with the MACD turning back up. All good signs of divergence, all good signs that we are complete at the bottom. And the stock market has been quite bullish lately as well. We're looking for a proper 5-wave impulse up. And this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, DJI, S&P, emerging markets, NASDAQ. They're all showing a similar situation set up, the small caps, in which we have a clear 1, 2, down here, 3, 4, 5. It's actually even more clear in our ES mini futures. This is the S&P 500, in which we also have, well, at least we have multiple ways to count 5 waves up. I know I had this red pattern look for a pullback, but clearly a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could have also counted this as the fifth wave top. No matter how you cut it, we have 5 waves up. There's a potential here too that there's actually a big C wave fake out, and we're going to have a lower low. But as of now, things are looking pretty bullish here. So what to expect next in Litecoin? Well, if this is really a diagonal, it'll be a little bit trickier to follow because we should see at least a rally into this box. It's not, I'm not totally sure exactly where it's going to go. It may not take impulsive shape. I know I'm talking about 5-wave impulsive rallies, things like that. We may or may not see that because again, my primary expectations for diagonal, that means that when we get to our ultimate top, we should see a 3-wave kind of pattern. It won't have a standard impulsive shape. Even though this rally here kind of did, the proportions more or less did hit standard. They'd fit standard expectations Fibonacci wise. So again, that green pattern is a possibility. So expect a rally into this box. Just roughly, I put out the 0.32 extension of this bigger pattern. So about $154 would be the bottom of that box. There's also the potential that we have some symmetry, as I've been mentioning in my other videos, in which our first wave, whatever it is, wave 1, A wave, should get to about where the peak was at the end of March. So about $132 or so. Might see that kind of symmetry. And eventually we'll find ourselves in that box. Now, while we don't necessarily expect an impulsive setup here, we're expecting to see that in most of the other coins, not just altcoins, but also Bitcoin, Ethereum. So once we get up here and we pull back, that will be the time to really buy if you're looking to deploy some lump sums. That'll give us more confidence, and we should see a much more clear setup in some of the other coins, because again, you should see a 5-wave impulse up and a 3-wave pullback down. Once we get that pullback, that will kind of stretch that bowstring out so that we can launch in a very clear impulsive fashion up to our eventual targets, which again, based on the fact that I'm interpreting this as a diagonal, most likely will get us somewhere north of $500. About 715 would be the ideal target. But if we do blast through that, If we see a bit more bullishness up front, that could mean that we're actually following our green alternate pattern, which could give us a lot more upside. So a lot of excitement ahead. Still some hurdles to clear. We haven't really, well, we don't have enough proof yet to confidently put the bottom behind us. So we are leaving that possibility open for a lower low. When these things happen, they surprise you sometimes. So be ready. If you're looking to buy, if you haven't bought the dip, it's not a bad time to buy a few tranches. If you're really nervous, you can just start dollar cost averaging now, or you wait for the bigger sign, as I mentioned, a complete rally up and a pullback. I'll have plenty of information and updates coming your way. So subscribe, that way you don't miss any updates. And until next time, thank you for watching and happy trading.